Good evening, greetings, and welcome here to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So I've had a couple people ask me why I always have a hat. Do you really want to be blinded for the whole episode? There you go. There's your answer. Anyways, we're here today to do an episode of Favorites. This is a show I do every Wednesday night. I pick a topic, usually a top 5 or a top 10, maybe a top 15, or on occasion a top 25. And that's what we're doing tonight, a 25. So I wouldn't say this is really ranking them, although I have put them in the order of the bands because I decided to do my top 25. How did I word this now? Let me try this again. So 25 albums that introduced me to my 25 favorite bands. So they're in the order of them being my favorite bands, but the albums aren't necessarily in that order. It's just that this is the album that I was the first one I purchased by this band. It kind of really cemented or introduced me to the band in many ways. There's a few here that actually didn't really help the band much, but that's a rarity. Most of the time, for most of these, I'd say a good 50 to 60% of them, the album that introduced me to the band, or the first album I bought from the band, is my favorite album by the band. That's normally pretty much what it is. So we're going to do this backwards. We'll go from my 25th favorite band and the album that introduced me to them all the way up to the one that introduced me to my favorite one. Okay, so the first one out of the gate, in 25th position, I guess you'd call it, is Tab in the Ocean from Nectar. This is my first Nectar album. To be honest with you, if you want to be truthful, it was purchased the same day as Recycle. I got them both first. They were part of a 8-album purchase that I purchased online and had them sent to me. There was 2 Nectars and 2 Blue Oyster Cult albums in there, but the reason that this one is going to be in this spot is because it was the first one I opened and the first one that I put in my playlist and the first one I liked. So this is a really good album for those of you who haven't seen it. It opens up into this, and then of course you have a couple of discs in here. One is the Canadian, or not Canadian, one is the European version, or the German version if you prefer. Sorry, I dropped the book on the floor. And the other one is the North American version, which was released about 4 years after this one, after the original one was released. Sorry, I'm just trying to find a place to put this back in. Okay, so that's my first album. Nectar's Tab in the Ocean. It's still my favorite Nectar album. I have about a half dozen or more Nectar albums now, but that was my first one. It was their third one, studio-wise. Next up is my 24th, and that is Cheap Trick. So this album was my first purchased. It was quickly followed by Heaven Tonight. In fact, I had to really think about it because I wasn't sure. I thought maybe I got Heaven Tonight first. But I clearly, my friend, we were talking about this band because he had live at Budokan, and he said they got a new album come out. We went and purchased it. We both purchased it the same day, a rarity, both of us purchasing something on the same day and the same album. And then after I listened to this, I went quickly and got Heaven Tonight because it had Surrender on it, which was on the live at Budokan as well. So great album. It's not my favorite. Heaven Tonight eventually became my favorite, so it's a bit of an abnormal that this one isn't my favorite. It's still a great album, though. Number 23, King Crimson's In the Court of the Crimson King. 40 years in the making, for me anyways. This was introduced to me by my friend back in 1980, and I never purchased it, and I didn't really want to listen to it, and I wasn't interested. And then I got it pretty close to the beginning of this channel. It was my first King Crimson album. I now love it, and so it's going to be the first album for King Crimson for me, and actually their first studio album as well. Next up, number, what's that? 3, so 5, 4, 23, 22, Heart. And this was my first Heart album. This is a greatest hits, but many refer to this as their greatest hits live. It's got 7 live tracks on it, which are absolutely outstanding. I don't really, usually when I listen to this, I know it's not something I normally do, but I usually just skip to the live stuff because most of the other stuff I can listen to on their studio albums. So, but this is a great album. It's also kind of the last one of the Heart albums that I own. So I own their first 5 studio and this, and then I'm not interested in anything after that. So this is my Heart album for number 22. Number 21, Gentle Giant. Sorry. And I think I have the wrong album here. I do. This is supposed to be 3 Friends. It is 3 Friends. Sorry, I didn't see the small writing there. So 3 Friends was the first Gentle Giant. I purchased this back in the early, I think it was early 1980s, like 82 or 83. I didn't really like it. I played it because I wanted to like it because I knew that it was a progressive band and I didn't have enough progressive bands, and the ones I had liked weren't doing progressive stuff anymore, so I wanted to like it, but I just didn't, and it's kind of left me with a sour taste for this album, which I have to say is being changed now because it's currently in my playlist again, giving it another try, and I'm really liking it a lot more, but it still has a little bit of that negative stuff on it. But this was my introduction and my first owned album by Gentle Giant, going back about 42 years now. Next up, my number 20, Rainbow. This is Man on the Silver Mountain. A good album. Definitely wanted to have this album, but it hasn't aged very well for me. I really don't ever listen to it anymore. There's only a couple tracks on it I like. It sounds a little bit amateurish. Some of the stuff is not as good written as I thought it was originally when I first got it, but I loved it a lot when I first got it. Not so much now. Rainbow Rising's kind of taken that spot, but that was for Rainbow. That was it. Number 20. Number 19, Van Halen's Fair Warning. My first one. I loved it. I quickly got Van Halen 1 and 2. Van 1 took right off right away. 2 took a fair amount of time before it did. And then I also got Women and Children first, and then actually, I think Diver Down and then Women and Children first. But this was my first Van Halen. Still my favorite. I love it. Number 18. This might surprise people. This was my first BTO album. The best of BTO so far. Greatest hits. I actually have 2 versions of this. I like it so much. So I've now since got almost all their early stuff. But this one I loved. It had everything on it that a casual BTO fan might like, but I've grown to like BTO a lot more than this. I believe I got this in 75, so it may be like in the top 3 or 4 albums that I owned, that I purchased at the beginning. I'm not sure. It might be 76. I'm trying to remember. I know I had it when I lived with my parents out on the Queensway in Etobicoke, but I can't remember if it was 75, 76, 77. I'm going to say it was 76 because I know Kiss had the first one, and actually had the first 2 or 3, I believe, and Boston was in there. This might have been in there as well. But anyways, that was my first BTO album, so that's 18. Number 17, of course, is Kiss. Kiss Alive. This was my first ever album, my first album by this band. Still one of my favorite albums. Probably my favorite Kiss album next to the Ace Frehley one. Great album. Next up, in 16th spot, a Blue Oyster Cult. This was my first one. Got this in the early 80s. I believe I got it the same year it came out. I just want to see. That was in 81. So, yeah, it seems about right. Towards the end of 81, beginning of 82. Pretty sure I got it in the winter time. So, and for the longest time, maybe, 82. So about, pretty close to 40 years before I bought another one. Now I love these guys. I don't know what made me wait so long. I actually looked into buying a couple of their albums a few times and didn't have the money for it, so I didn't get them. So Blue Oyster Cult, Fire of Unknown Origin, number 16. Number 15, AC/DC's Back in Black. Massive album for me the year that it came out. I got it the same year, probably within a month after it came out. It was definitely at the beginning of the summer for that year. And this is from 1980. And for the longest time, well, I wouldn't say the longest time, but for a good 2 or 3 years, it was the only AC/DC I had. And then I started going back in the catalog and bought some of their other stuff as well. Just a fantastic, out of the ballpark, home run hitting album. So number 14 is Neil Young's Harvest. I got this one around the same time as I was moved to my second apartment ever, so it was in 86 or so. I had it on vinyl. I didn't have it on vinyl? No, I had it on cassette. It was a cassette, and then eventually I got it on CD, but I've had this album a long time. It was my first Neil Young. It's still probably my favorite. It's arguable, but I think it's still probably my favorite. Then my next one, the number 13, Supertramp, A Breakfast in America. This was a massive album for me when it came out. I got it relatively early after it came out. This was in 79, I believe. Yeah, I think I got it in the summer of 1980, around that time period after my first year of high school. And it was my first Supertramp, and for quite a few many years, it was the only Supertramp. And then sometime in the late 80s, I collected Crime of the Century, and then the other two came much later. Okay, so that's the first stack. We're going to move this other stack over here so we don't... Oh, shit. When you're going to push something, you should push it from the bottom, not from the top. Bad idea. Almost lost them all. Anyways, we get on to number 12 now, which is Led Zeppelin. In Through the Outdoor was my first one. Quickly followed by Led Zeppelin 2 and Led Zeppelin 4, I believe. And then Houses of the Holy and so on. But those were my first three. This one was my favorite for quite a long time. It's probably moved halfway down the list now, though. Next up, my number 11, Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance. This was my first Judas Priest album. Was my only Judas Priest album really for about 3 or 4 years. Then I got Defenders of the Faith, and then another 20 years passed before I got any other ones. But this was it. This one recently, for a while, Judas Priest had pole vaulted ahead of Iron Maiden, but Iron Maiden has made a huge comeback this year and are now in the 10th spot, a spot held by Led Zeppelin for many years now, no longer being held by them. Iron Maiden, this was my first Iron Maiden album, The Number of the Beast. I remember just absolutely being floored by how good this was. I loved this album. It was one of my favorite albums when it came out. Slowly, some of the other stuff, Seventh Son of the Seventh Son, Power Slave, these two albums specifically competed with this one throughout the 80s and 90s. And then now I've got a whole host of them, and this may end up being, it might not even stay in the top 5 at some point. I don't know. They got some really good stuff. So number 9, Pink Floyd, Animals was my first one. The first one I ever heard was probably The Wall, but that kind of turned me off Floyd, and I didn't really follow them until I bought this one day. I don't even remember where I got this from. I know Dark Side of the Moon I got before this, actually, but I never listened to it. It was in the drawer and just stayed there forever. And then I got this one afternoon somewhere, probably in the 2004, 2005 time period, 2006 in that time period. I loved it, and then I started going back, and then Dark Side of the Moon got played then at that point. But so that's the album for my number 9. Number 8, Security from Peter Gabriel. I got this in the summer of 1980, quickly followed by Plays Alive, and the two of them I had, pretty much those two. And then when I moved out in the mid 80s, like 85 or so, I was at a record store and I bought some cassettes. Peter Gabriel 2 and Peter Gabriel 1 were the two I bought. So yeah, this is a great, I actually had this in a German version first, and then I bought it in this version. So when I was singing it, I was getting all mixed up because I knew it all in German and I didn't know it in English. But that was, so that's my number 8. Number 7, Heaven and Hell from Black Sabbath, monster album for me in 1980. Got it fairly soon after it came out. It was my first Black Sabbath album and was a monster one, still my favorite. Number 6, this might surprise people, Meaty Beaty Big and Bouncy was my first Who album. I don't even remember how I came about this, but I know I had it in the 90s. Around the time when I got together with my wife, I was listening to this. Well, even before her, like in the early 90s, I was listening to this a lot in my car at the time. And I remember playing it all the time, and she actually liked it. That's why I remember that it was the first one I had. I didn't have any other stuff by The Who at that point. Next up, my number 5 from my 5th band, Pieces of 8, probably my favorite album. Bought this first, was quickly followed by Cornerstone, which came out shortly after I got this, and I think Grand Illusion. I can't remember which one, how it went after that, but this was definitely my first one, and I love it. Still love it. Number 4, a top 10 album for me of all time. The first one from the band, Trick of the Tail, and Wind in the Wuthering. I got them pretty close. I may have actually got them at the same time. I can't quite remember how it went about, but I know I had them both that same year. And this one I loved, and that one I loved too, but I think this one was the first one that I kind of really played in my playlist. Number 3, Yes's Drama. I remember this coming out when I was in high school, my first year. I liked it a lot, but I thought it was kind of really weird. But it motivated me enough to go back and start listening to some of their other stuff. It's still a top 5 Yes album for me, but it's not in first place. Number 2, Jethro Tull's The Original Masters. So somebody gave this to me. I can't remember who it was or when it was. I know I had it in the 90s because that's when I remember listening to it the most. And that was my first Jethro Tull album. Played a lot. Then I started looking for their albums, and that's when I started collecting them. Was actually probably when I moved and had my daughter. Then I started collecting their stuff. And number 1 from Rush, and this is Permanent Waves. I was going to say Moving Pictures, but it's Permanent Waves. My first album. I got it a few days after it came out. It was probably at that time period my favorite album for a short period of time before Triumph took over. But it's an absolutely killer album. Still my favorite Rush album. So it's been my favorite Rush album for 45 years, going on 46 now. So that's it. Those are my 25 initial albums that I owned by my 25 favorite rock bands. And so I'll just give them to you all once backwards from top to bottom. Rush's Permanent Waves, Jethro Tull's Original Masters, Yes's Drama, Genesis in a Trick of the Tail, Styx's Pieces of 8, Meaty Beaty Big and Bouncy from The Who, Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell, Security from Peter Gabriel, Pink Floyd's Animals, Iron Maiden's The Number of the Beast, Screaming for Vengeance from Judas Priest, and In Through the Outdoor from Led Zeppelin. And we'll do the rest of the stack. Hopefully I won't knock it over. I almost did. Yeah, that would have been a disaster. Supertramp's Breakfast in America, Harvest by Neil Young, AC/DC's Back in Black, Blue Oyster Cult's, Fire of Unknown Origin. I drew a blank there for a second. Kiss Alive, Best of BTO So Far, Van Halen, Fair Warning, Rainbows, Man on the Silver Mountain, or their debut if you prefer. Gentle Giants, Three Friends. Heart's Greatest Hits, or Live if you prefer it. Greatest Hits Live. In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. Dream Police by Cheap at Trick. And Nectar's Tab in the Ocean. Those are the 25. Now, many of these bands in the next couple of years, I think there's about a half a dozen of them. They're going to probably drop out of my top 25 bands. And then some of these bands that are really pushing to get in there are going to get in there. And that's what happens when you continue to listen to music and continue to explore stuff. Anyways, I hope you like this kind of a fun list to do. Please hit the like and subscribe. It's much appreciated. If you want, you can make your comments on maybe you had different albums for these bands, or maybe you want to do your own 25 list with your own 25 bands, your first albums. I've discovered, for me, a lot of the first albums are still, in many ways, still my favorite albums by the band because they are impactful. This is how you discovered the band. In the case of Pink Floyd, it didn't happen until many years later. In the case of bands like BTO and Kiss and Rush, it was almost immediate. That's the way it is. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this, and we will see you next week on Favorites when we will be doing a ranking. Yeah, it'll be the first one I've done in a while. I'll be ranking the first 5 studio albums of Heart. I don't think I would rank the entire discography of Heart because, first of all, I don't own any of the ones that came out in the 1980s or beyond. I have no interest in owning them. I do love the first 5, so those are the ones I'm going to rank. Anyways, hope to see you then. So take care and have yourself a good evening, and goodbye.